How much money is generational wealth? Look, it's a really good question. What does generational wealth mean? It's one of those talking points, one of those things that we hear. I want to have generational wealth. I want to be comfortable. All these conceptual things that we mention, but what does it really mean? How much money is generational wealth really? And again, it's not one of those cut and dry things where you can put an actual number on it. It's more, as the name or the term suggests, generational, meaning it can pass down to one generation and then the next. But in order to do that, let's look at the premise of what we're talking about here. In order to do that, it has to survive from one generation to the next. Now, there was a time period in Brooklyn, New York, for instance, where a lot of African Americans were owning real estate in Brooklyn. Then they passed it down to their children, who then blew it. Okay? That's really the difference. Wealth was passed down, however, it wasn't kept and sustained or built upon. That whole foundation, it wasn't expanded. So that's really what it's about. And how do you actually ensure the wealth preserves? And this is not just a black thing, by the way. This happens in a lot of places you've probably seen, where rich parents pass something down to their kids and they start blowing the money like crazy and they run out of money and then eventually get cut off, or the family fortune just dissipates. But how do you actually do it? There's a couple ways that you can actually make sure that the generational wealth persists. Look at some of the popular family franchises. I don't want to name any names, but you probably can figure out who or Google it. Look, how do they do it? They start bringing their children into the family business early. So family business is a very key component to this. Say whatever it is, you bring your children into it and eventually they take over and their kids take over. I'll give you a very prominent example. WWE. Everybody loves Hulk Hogan, remembers Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker, Macho Man. That used to be the World Wrestling Federation. And in fact, it's a fourth, if not fifth generation family business. It started with a guy that promoted boxing and wrestling in New York. Jess McMahon, I think his name was. Then his son came after. His name was Vincent James McMahon, or Vince McMahon Sr. His son then came in and took over from him. His name was Vince McMahon Jr., the guy who's now the head of WWE. And his kids are involved in the business, and now their kids are being groomed for that. So that is one way where you actually build and sustain that generational wealth, by creating a family business that you sort of bring everybody into. Another way that you can do it is if you're someone who may not be, you don't have a business, but you're just investing. You can bring your children into that also, or even something like real estate. There's a lot of ways, but making the children aware and making them value the dollar instead of just taking it for granted, because not valuing the dollar is it's the fastest way, the safest way to make sure that you actually blow it. But if they understand the value of the dollar and how it's created, it's generated, how you grow it, giving them that financial literacy. I always say wealth is a function of the conversations around the dinner table. So when you have those conversations around the dinner table, such as where did you invest, or going to work, this and that and the other, that's when you can make sure that generational wealth becomes a normalized item in your everyday life. And that's something that actually takes sacrifice. Before you look at somebody and go, oh, they're just lucky that they got born into a family. Okay, they had to start from someplace. And if that hasn't been the case with you, instead of saying they're just lucky, you become the person where your kids and your grandkids can have friends that say that they're lucky. But somebody had to make that sacrifice. Might as well be you if it's not you. But that's how it works. How much money is generational wealth? Well, not necessarily a number, it's more of a lifestyle, if you will, and making sure that it doesn't go away and it grows with every generation, because at the end of the day, inflation will eat you up, so you got to make sure that it grows. But that's really what it's all about. Investing money, family business, things of that nature, where everybody comes together like a true tribe to make sure that it happens.